Oh boy. Tonight's the night, my non-existent viewers. It's TVB. This is the November 2024 Skizzo Rambling. And I'm just, I've been low-key has been excited and dreading this one particular for a very long time now, because I've seen this coming. The November 2024 Skizzo Rambling, I've been making these Skizzo Rambling videos, or half of them at least, that I've made this year on a monthly basis on the first day of each month. But this time and last time and back in September, I've decided to make an exception. Because September, I was just way too busy with moving out here to Ohio for my new zoo job to, make a Skizzo Rambling on September 1st. The first few days of September, I was, quitting. I was basically, rounding up my time at my old job, the Dogtopia. Not my my older Dogtopia in Fort Collins, but my old Dogtopia Union, where I worked for 8 months. And then my October one was, on my birthday instead of October 1st. I thought it'd be nice to do, a little birthday themed Skizzo Rambling. And this time, I really wanted to wait until after Tuesday until we get the results to make this Skizzo Rambling. And I was originally considering just making this video tomorrow night on Thursday, the 7th. Because Thursdays are basically my new Fridays from the zoo. So I was like, hey, let's just stay up late and record this Skizzo Rambling and make this video right now, or on a Thursday, it's like a little way I can cut loose on the weekends, and then go get out of the house afterward, go out with some friends or something like that after that. But, I figured because, well, first of all, tomorrow night I have an event to attend with the zoo, and I got plans Friday night as well, so I figured, you know what, Wednesday, we finally got the results today for the election this year, so I figured, Wednesday, today's being the 6th, it's now or never, so just kind of hit my frickin' button, I guess, been making this video. But yeah, I mean, am I excited for Trump being back in office? No. But I was not excited for Kamala to be back in office either. To be in office, in case she kind of already was in office, she was the vice president. But, I was kind of braced for disappointment either way. This is the 2024 Skizzo Rambling, for the election. This year, I've done, election videos on, I did make a few, politically charged videos in 2016. Back when I was, way back when I was a senior in high school. But I've deleted those videos for personal reasons. And a handful of other videos I made in high school and even, the start of my college years. There's just some videos I've made within the past 11 years that just really have not aged well. So, I'm no longer, I don't really act like this anymore. So I just felt not completely deleting them. I've set them all private so, I can look at them. But I really don't plan on doing so anytime soon. But yeah, I also did a video called Welp Biden Takes the Cake back in 2020 after he won the presidency, where I just talked about my thoughts on the election with some Call of Duty gameplay over it. Yeah, I figured, well, I can make a Skizzo theme rambling based around the election as well, because the whole point of these videos is where I just kick back, relax, and just do a voiceover over some Minecraft gameplay and just talk about life for as long as I feel like it. And when I say talk about life, I mean I could do things do little rankings, or talk about movies I haven't had a chance to review, or rank movies I saw within the a past season, spring or summer or fall this year, from worst to best, stuff like that, or spoiler talks for particular movies that have come out every year, things like that. So I figured there's so much I feel like I could say about the election this year, and just the political scene in this country in general. I feel like I could go on for hours and hours talking about it, because there's so much that I have to say. And so much so that I even considered writing a script for this video. like, the whole point of these skizzo ramblings is that they're completely unscripted when I talk about life and stuff like that. But this time I was, like, really tempted to make it the exception because of all things I have to say. But lo and behold, I just chose not to. I'm kind of just, like, going off the rails with this video. Like, I'm really just gonna say the first thing that, like, comes to my mind about this subject. And please understand that, like, again, I don't usually talk about politics on my channel, but whenever I do, I want you all to understand that, like, I'm not bringing stuff like this up because I want to change anyone's minds on things. Even if I did want to change people's minds, I wouldn't be able to because I'm really bad at changing people's minds on things. Just keeping it really honest with you guys. So if, like, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not trying to offend you or upset you or be edgy or any of those things. Like, I don't want to offend. My goal is not to offend. I don't mean to offend anybody, but if you're offended by what I have to say in this video, that's your business. That's your call. Alright? Not mine. Like, I'm very difficult to offend. But please understand, like, if you completely disagree with, like, everything I say in this video, that's okay. If you think I'm one of the American idiots that Green Day warned us about back in 2004, that's okay. If you want to dislike this video because you disagree with me, that's okay. If you want to, like, challenge my views in the comments, if I say something like that you disagree with and you feel like attempting to change my mind on it, that's okay. Go ahead and do so. Because this channel, I like to treat it as, like, a safe space where, you know, like, I will get into this. Like, I definitely believe in the phrase we can disagree and be friends, but you gotta draw a line somewhere. And yeah, with all that being said, like, it's so weird being, like, an independent in this country, because I've been old enough to vote since 2016. I've felt, like, politically homeless since, like, day one. Like, I've never not voted for third-party candidates. 2016, I voted for Gary Johnson, who was a Libertarian candidate that year. And, you know, I met his running mate, Bill Weld. That was, like, during my senior year of high school. I turned 18, like, a month before that election happened. And, yeah, my mom and I met Bill Weld at a little Libertarian conference that was going on in New York City, and I got a selfie with him and everything. Oh, he also ran Republican in the primaries in 2020. That was a good day. And 2020, I voted for, after the primaries, after Bill had lost the primaries of Trump, which I was not surprised by, I voted for Joe Jorgensen, again, Libertarian candidate that year. And this year, I'm gonna be honest, I was really, this is the year where I was, like, the least excited to vote out of all the years I've been old enough to do so. Like, I was not psyched about voting for RFK Jr. this year, the independent candidate, especially after hearing him endorse Trump. I watched his whole 43-minute long speech. It's up on YouTube. He brings up a lot of really valid points, like, in that speech, but he endorses Trump, and it's like, oh, man, like, I thought he would, part of me is kind of like, oh, man, I think he would know better not to do that. But after watching his speech, I can, excuse me. Oh, jeez. 'Tis the season. But yeah, RFK Jr.'s whole speech, like, you know, he did endorse Trump, and he pulled out of the ballot on swing states, like here in Ohio, but good thing for me, I can't register to Ohio currently because I don't have an Ohio State driver's license, so I voted my out-of-state ballot. They mailed me one instead. And, you know, New Jersey's a blue state, while Ohio is a swing state, so yeah, it's a huge victory for Trump that he won Ohio. And yeah, like, so I voted a few weeks ago my out-of-state ballot, just like how I did in 2020 for Joe Jorgensen, because I was, like, not able to vote, like, in Colorado. Which, it's funny, because, like, back in 2020, they legalized weed in my home states, New Jersey and New York, which I kind of count New York as, like, a kind of a home state, because I grew up outside New York City, and my mom would take my sister and I there every week when we were kids. They legalized pot back then in those two states, and I was just like, it's about freaking time. Like, seriously. I remember just kids smoking pot like around me like long before they like like in high school, and like even when I was like home for the semester like a year before they legalized it there. Yeah, so I'm very curious. Like, I haven't heard any news of any more states legalizing pot, but that's one thing where it's like, this is going to be a theme throughout this video, right? You can learn a lot from people that you disagree with. And, like, I'm a big advocate for legalizing marijuana and decriminalizing drugs, but, like, I've had some pretty, like, in-depth conversations with people who are, like, against weed, especially when I was living in Nebraska 2 years ago, when it's still illegal there. But I hear that more people are voting to at least legalize medical weed there, so which I think is kind of the right direction. But I've talked to people who are, like, fervently against legalizing weed, and one argument, because I've always had family in Denver, like, it's been a year and a half since I moved out of Colorado, for the Utica Zoo internship, which that's how I ended up back out east. But, like, some people, the homelessness issue in Denver has gotten, in the capital city of Colorado, has gotten a lot worse since I legalized weed, like, in that state, because people use the argument, like, oh, no one wants to work anymore, they're just gonna be like, ooh, I just want to sit around and smoke weed all day, right? But in doing so, like, oh, you don't have a job, you're wasting what little money you do have on weed, and, like, you can't pay your bills, and you get evicted, thus you end up homeless. Which, here's the thing, like, I feel like those kinds of people, it's like, oh, legalizing weed enables that to happen. But by that logic, doesn't legalizing alcohol enable, like, drunkards to just, like, beat their spouses and their kids and just be violent and abusive? Would legalizing alcohol enable, like, drunk driving accidents or liver cancer or, like, bar fights? Like, but I feel like for every, like, crazy alcoholic, right, who does stuff like that, there's loads of legal, like, law-abiding, responsible citizens that just so happen to drink. Just like how there's plenty of people in legal states that, smoke weed or take edibles or stuff like that, who still have a job, who still have goals, still have ambitions, and still have, are still very motivated people. I mean, it's not. I'm a firm believer in the idea that it's not like the drug itself that's the problem. It's the people that abuse it. Like, I think that applies to a lot of things. Like, this is one thing where it's like Gandhi famously said, "I like your Christ, but not your Christians." Right? Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. Just for example, I've grown to feel the same way towards feminism. Like, I like your textbook definition as to, like, the dictionary's definition as to what, like, feminism is. Just, like, advocating women's rights to be equal to those of men on the basis of gender equality. I like the textbook definition of feminism, but not your feminists. Because here's my thing, viewers. I am, obviously, because as you guys can probably tell, I've only ever voted for third-party candidates. Like, the main reasons why I voted for RFK Jr. was, like, 1, he's not Trump, 2, he's not Kamala or Biden, and 3, like, he's the nephew of, like, JFK, right? And I agree with him on most of his policies, like his policy on the border and the environment. I don't agree with his, like, anti-vaccine rhetoric, or, like, him believing in those conspiracy theories, right? But I also believe in, like, he wants to end the war on drugs. He wants to, he wants to strike a middle ground, on the abortion subject. And I just agreed with his policies enough. And in his 43-minute long speech, which is where he endorsed Trump, it's I live in because New Jersey is a blue state, so he was still on the ballot there. But, like, he also brought up a lot of really valid points about how the food processing is, like, ruining us as a nation. It was just a really fascinating speech. Like, it's good to, like, have when you're, cleaning the house or, like, playing Minecraft or, like, some game like that. Yeah, check it out if you haven't had the chance. But here's just my views. Like, here's one thing I've come to learn within the past, like, within the start of my adult life. I've grown to just despise labels. Like, I understand that labeling people and labeling ourselves things is, we humans do that naturally, and it's inevitable and it's necessary. So labels are useful. Like, we need labels, but with that being said, like, I don't want to subscribe to more labels than I have to. Like, for example, it's way easier to label someone like a vegan than to label them someone who doesn't consume like meat or dairy or other animal products. Like, no, that's too wordy. Just call them a vegan, right? Just like how it's way easier to label someone like me, hey, I'm white, instead of I'm of European descent with fair skin and blonde hair and like fair complexions and so. Yeah, it's like, no, just call me white. Like, that's... see, there's also, like, it's way easier to label someone male or female or straight or gay or whatever else. Like, there's some things about yourself that you just can't change. And so those kinds of labels, like, I don't have a problem with, right? And, like, there's other things, like, labels that we subconsciously, like, grab onto, right? They, like, if you grew up, like, I grew up in a religious household, so I grew up labeling myself a Catholic because my family would label themselves that, too. Like, or there's people who label themselves, like, hey, again, look at politics, like, I'm a liberal, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a conservative, or I'm a Republican. People label themselves things. I don't have a problem labeling others the things they want me to label them as. It's just, I'm very, very weary of what labels I subscribe to, because... I was going to say this now, viewers. People get so, like, entrenched in these labels that it just, like, in certain labels that it just poisons their minds. Like, again, I don't have a problem with people who don't share my, like, political or religious views. I really don't. Like, I'm an independent, like, first and foremost. I'm not registered as any, like, particular party. And that's why, like, I'm an independent, because I hate labels. And I acknowledge that being an independent is a label in of itself. Because, like, not registering as a party, well, hey, you're not registered, therefore you're independent. Like, I get that. I'm fine with that. But, like, what was I gonna say? Yeah, like, I'm not a liberal, I'm not a conservative, I'm not a leftist, I'm not a right-winger, like, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. And like I said, I'm not a Trump supporter, not a Kamala or Biden or Hillary Clinton supporter. Like, I'm not even, like, apolitical or an anarchist either. Like, I do pay attention to the news. I do I try to stay up to speed with current events. I do take sides and take strong opinions on a lot of subjects. Right? And I do vote every 4 years. I just think that's kind of like our right to do so as Americans. And I really want to exercise that, because it's a huge thing that we seriously take for granted in this part of the world. But that being said, though, like, I don't care, like, what I sound like in your mind. Like, I guess if I really had, like, pick a party or, like, register as something or some kind of ideology, I'd say I'm more libertarian than anything else. Like I said, I voted for Gary Johnson, I voted for Joe Jorgensen, and to be honest, I kind of think RFK Jr. is more libertarian than the actual libertarian candidate they picked this year, Chase Oliver, which, again, I would rather have voted if RFK Jr. was not on the ballot at all. Excuse me. I would have picked Chase Oliver as my second choice. Definitely over Jill Stein, which I haven't liked Jill Stein since 2016. Like, honestly, Gary Johnson had 3% of the votes back in 2016, while Jill Stein had 1%, so I feel like a lot of those votes Jill, like, took from Gary. Because, well, both from Gary's own mistakes back then, but that's 2016, that's old news at this point, whatever. But, yeah, I'm, like... I don't have a problem labeling others. I might not subscribe to those labels myself, but I don't have a problem labeling others the things they want me to label them as, because, like, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt that, like, they have a completely understandable, like, and rational reasoning as to why they believe in whatever it is they believe in, even if they have views that, like, I strongly disagree with. But I do have a problem with, like, again, people nowadays just, like, oh my gosh. I'm not joking, viewers. Like, some of the rudest, snobbiest, most cult-minded, illogical, annoying, obnoxious, aggressive, ignorant, judgmental, like, toxic people, like, I've ever met have political views that are just, like, ludicrously far to the left or ridiculously far to the right. It's just, it's like, people, the old phrase, like, Americans treat politics like how they treat sports. I'd go as far as to say that Americans treat politics like how lions and hyenas and other African carnivores treat gazelles. Like, seriously, I'm so sick of the polarization, and you go onto the media and on social media and stuff like that, and there's so much like hatred going on, like people just spewing out hatred in both directions, and people are so fixated on just being angry and who to blame for this country's problems and like actually finding a solution, and it's just not healthy. And again, I can't possibly pull myself to vote for either of the main two every election cycle, because I don't want to support a system that I hate. Like, even George Washington himself, like, warned us about parties. Like, the Founding Fathers, they didn't want a two-party system. And yet the president's following, like, Washington started making parties, and he was like, stop, you idiots. Like, what did I just say? And he's been rolling in his grave ever since. Like, if they saw, like, what this country has turned into, like, they'd want to live somewhere else. Because we're having taxation without representation. We're starting wars in places we have no business in doing so. And again, it's like land of the stupid, home of the hypocrites. I'm gonna take a swig of my drink really quick. That's good. But yeah, like, the two-party system, I hate it with like every ounce of my flesh. That's only the one thing that hasn't changed at all, like, since high school. Like, obviously, this coming June, coming up in 2025, it's gonna be 8 years since I graduated from MHS, and it's been 8 years since I voted for Gary Johnson back then. It's like, that's one thing that really hasn't changed about me, was, like, that the whole, like, left-right binary has just gotta go. It's not just in America, it's, like, all over a lot of countries, they're, like, within their politics, there is, like, a clear left and right, even though, like, we have so many different perspectives. We only ever get two viewpoints, like, and I'm not saying that, like, having multiple parties would make things perfect, but I still think it's way better than, like, just the left and just the right. Like, instead of just having Trump and Kamala debating each other, again, have RFK Jr. on, have Chase Oliver on, have Jill Stein on. Like, we don't need, like, a dozen parties. We don't need a dozen presidential candidates every year, just like 3 or 4 or 5. I understand why some people are skeptical of like a multiple party system, because some people are like, oh, if there's like 4 main parties, and what if like the guy only has like 30% of the votes wins, and then like, oh, we have 70% of the population who voted for the other 3 candidates, not him, like that's gonna cause chaos. It's like, yeah, I understand where they're coming from. Like, I've heard, well, like, I'm not saying, like I said, it wouldn't make things perfect, but like maybe like an approval voting system would fix things. Like, I've heard of this one system of voting where like you have the option to vote for multiple candidates, like yes or no. Like, if you want to just vote for Trump, or if you just want to vote for Kamala, or if you want to vote for Trump as well as like a handful of third-party candidates, or vote for Kamala and do a handful of like third-party candidates. Like, basically whoever gets the highest percentage of the votes, like of like thumbs up votes versus thumb downs votes, wins. Which I do find it incredibly interesting how Trump like won the popular vote. And again, you can't blame third-party candidates for Trump winning, dear Kamala supporters. Even if you gave all the votes for RFK and Chase Oliver and Jill Stein and all the other third-party candidates to Kamala, she'd still lose. Just keeping it real. And the frickin', oh god, what was I gonna say? And like, I don't think that, I mean, I can see, I'm not, again, proof voting wouldn't make things perfect either, but I think ideally, like, again, if you think I'm some moron who doesn't know what he's talking about, that's totally okay. Let me know. If you want to, like, yell at me in the comments, go ahead and do so. But yeah, I think that, oh shoot, I think that the people, the third-party candidates, jeez, God, I've had a long day. I'm kind of drawing a blank on what the last point I was gonna make was. But yeah, I think that there shouldn't be any parties at all. In my mind, like, I think that everyone should just run as individuals. like maybe go for like a tournament sort of style like in the elections, or maybe if it's like at first there's four main candidates and like if two of them hit like the highest amount of votes, it'll end up as the two of them. It's just I really wish we had a system that like reflected America's diversity, not just a diversity of like races or genders or sexualities, but also the diversity of thought, the diversity of people's different opinions. Because, like I said, you can learn a lot from people that you disagree with. Like, I watch a lot of conservative YouTubers who've really brought my eyes to a lot of things. But, like, again, I can't pull myself to vote for Trump or, be a conservative or, like, call myself that. Because, again, both left and the right in this country are just absolute hypocrites. Like, that's the thing. Like, the conservatives, the Republicans, they're all like, ooh, like, I'm on the right. Like, I'm voting for Trump. Like, I'm a conservative because I believe in small government. No, you don't. You want to restrict people's, like, freedoms of, like, gender expression and, like, women's reproductive rights, which I'm aware that Trump himself has, like, said that he's fine with abortion in the case of, like, rape or incest or the endangerment of the life of the mother. But still, there's plenty of, like, conservative politicians just, like, say they're pro-freedom, but just, like, want to shove their religious views down people's throats. And it's, like, I honestly think that a lot of those, like, kinds of, like, those far right-wing conservatives, these evangelical kooks you see on Fox News, I think they worship Trump more than they worship Jesus. Or Yahweh or Allah or whatever their respective, like, deity is. Because, like, the Christians voting for Trump are like, oh, Trump is such a good Christian president. It's like, yeah, well, he cheated on his wives with a porn star, and and Melania is his fourth wife. So apparently committing adultery and divorce is like okay as long as you're in charge of the White House, ignoring those Bible verses. Also, those people are going to be like, oh, we need to, like, outlaw this thing and that thing because the Bible forbids it and God says it's a sin, right? But then, like, you ignore the same holy book when it says, like, give to the poor, love your neighbor, like, thou shalt not kill. They're still pro-war. Thou shalt not steal. Again, pro-war. We're invading their countries and taking their shit. And, again, like, thou shalt not commit adultery or... It condemns, like, divorce in the New Testament. And yet, like, there are so many, like, Christian couples getting divorced in, like, the Deep South and, like, super religious states like that. And and people will be like, oh, the one of seven deadly sins, like greed is a sin, pride is a sin. Yet, like, these people have massive egos are always out to protect the rich and get their money in whatever means necessary. And, like, they say they want small spending, and yet, like, and they want low taxes. Like, I do hate taxation. And conservatives say, like, hey, we want small taxes, yet they still want a massive military, and Trump wants to build a massive wall across the southern border, which, if the ancient Chinese couldn't keep out the Mongolians with their giant wall, back in ancient times, how's it going to help America with Mexico? Like, I understand, like, I am pro, like, border security, very, very much. Like, I'm not an open borders guy. Like, there's the whole crisis in, like, the Mexican border. It's horrible. It's a huge humanitarian crisis. But I just don't think a massive wall is gonna, like, that. No, that's ridiculous. Like, that's gonna cause more problems than it'll solve. Like, that's the crazy thing. This is the thing that, like, really makes me paranoid about a two-party system. Is this whole, again, like, that it entrenches people in this whole, like, black and white, you're either with me or against me mindset. Like, because I've met, like, Trump supporters who, like, here's the thing. Like I said, you can learn off people you disagree with. Like, I have, like, family and friends on both sides of the political spectrum who vote for Trump and Kamala, respectively, who I love very, very, very dearly, and thank God they're not like this, but I've met Trump supporters who take insults to Trump, like, worse than Trump himself. Or, like, I've met, like, back in 2016, I met, like, Hillary Clinton supporters who took insults to Hillary, or, like, or, like, Bernie Sanders, like, Bernie Bros taking insults to Bernie Sanders, like, worse than Bernie and Hillary themselves. Like, it's just people who are just that entrenched on like either side of the political spectrum, where it's like everything and everyone within my party is or community is good, and everything and everyone outside of it is just evil. And if you disagree with me on XYZ, like you're public enemy number one or something. That's a crazy thing, guys. It's like I try to point out like valid issues and problems of this country, and the conservatives like, oh, like you just hate America, you're not a patriot, like, oh, you're a godless communist. It's like, oh my gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I've heard a conservative like, you know, call someone a communist for the wrong reasons, like conservatives need to realize that just because someone is like even mildly on the left or like a liberal with like their economic policies doesn't instantly make him a communist. And hey, liberals, hey, leftists, just because someone has a social like view, like a particular view on a certain subject that's even mildly like conservative or like socially conservative doesn't instantly make him a bigot or a racist or a Nazi or a fascist. Like, it's just people need to get outside and touch some grass. Like, the conservatives are like, oh, like, you just hate America. If you don't like America, why don't you just leave? Because I don't have to deal with its foreign policies? Duh. Or, like, the people on the left are just like, oh, like, if you disagree, like, you're a homophobe. Oh, if you disagree, like, you're a racist. Like, oh, if you disagree, like, you're a sexist. And it's just, it's so weird. Back to what I said earlier in this video, right? Like, I grew up Catholic. I grew up in a religious environment. It's like, my theology over the years has fluctuated quite a bit, right? But I still believe in God very much. Always have, always will. And if you don't believe in God or believe in, like, something else, that's cool. Like, yeah, like, but I still have, like, a handful of very, like, rock-solid core beliefs. And one of those is that to be a person of faith is to be human. Like, one of my big beliefs is that, like, I don't believe that there are any, like, truly non-religious people in the world. There's just people who are like self-aware enough to admit that they worship something, and people who are not. And, you know, as people like in our society move like further away from like religious affiliations like Christianity or Judaism, it's like I think they're innately looking for a substitute, whether they are self-aware enough to realize that's worship or not. I think a lot of them are just latching onto leftism and liberalism and other like political ideologies. Because, like, again, I think that conservatives worship Trump when they worship Jesus. But on the other side, it's like, I've noticed that so many, like, liberals and leftists... I'm saying liberals and leftists because there is a huge difference between being a leftist and being a liberal. I've met leftists who be like, ooh, I'm not a liberal, I'm a leftist, right? But, because I'm not, like, again... I'm not claiming to be a political expert. This is a thing. Like, there's a lot that I have to learn about these kinds of subjects. I'm very ignorant and don't take us the wrong way, viewers, but you are too. Like, everyone is ignorant. Like, nobody knows everything. Most people don't know most things. And that's fine, because nobody needs to know most things. I'm not amazingly well-versed on politics, I'll admit it, and there's some subjects I couldn't care less about, but I still really want to make this video, get things off my chest, because I've had leftists tell me stuff like that, and like, and it gets interesting, because all the huge divides between all these different like parties. Again, this is why I think a two-party system has got to go, because there's just so many like differences of values in between all these communities, all this infighting. Again, you have the left, like people are just like so far in this leftist idea that like they start saying like, oh, that Democrats are just blue Republicans, or that Democrats are just as horrible as the Republicans. Which is funny they're saying that, because hey, if you guys hate both main parties with a burning passion as much as we do, maybe the libertarians or libertarian-ish people like me and the leftists should get along more. And even then, like, I've seen people just who are so like far to the right, like these alt-right types. Again, I'm not friends with these people, but I've heard some of them say, like, oh, Republicans are still too liberal, or like, oh, I want Trump to be the dictator that the left thinks that he is, because he's not, like, strong enough, or just crazy stuff like that. And it's just, and I want to learn, I want to gather as much information as I possibly can. But it's just difficult to know sometimes who's to listen to and who's just blabbering nonsense. Because I feel like you're just going to offend somebody regardless of whatever it is that you believe in. Right? And especially that's true with the left because, again, like I said, the conservatives are total hypocrites, but it's like then the left is too, because it's like, here's the thing, back to what I said earlier about, like, different religions, like, as people move further away from Christianity, they look for a substitute. I think it's preposterous seeing people who are raised in very, like, conservative or, like, religious environments, but to not only leave their religion and become, like, agnostic or atheist or, like, spiritual but not religious or just non-religious in general, they start becoming, like, super, like, these flaming liberals or these radical leftists. It's like a tobacco user who quits cigarettes and only start vaping. Because, just, keyword, my experience, I have been on the receiving, like, I have received way more hostility and disrespect from liberals and leftists over the years for, like, you know, my, like, centrist views than I've had from conservatives. Like, it's just, it's kind of shocking to me. Like, again, the people who always parade, like, love and tolerance and acceptance and inclusion, that only really applies to, like, the identities. They want everyone to look different but think the same. And just the PC, the political correctness culture, it's like, it's just crazy. I think that, it's almost like, I've had they say, like, I've heard people on the left, like I said, with the people who are, you know, grew up in conservative environments, like, you know, the very, like, reserved, like, religious traditional households, they grew up to be either, like, carbon copies of the beliefs that they were raised with, or they go, like, the total opposite. I think both as preposterous, because I'm not friends with this girl anymore, but, like, I had, like, a female friend at CSU who would go off in the most, like, insanely ignorant and close-minded, like, anti-LGBTQ and, like, pro-life tirades about her Christianity and stuff like that and her traditional values, and she would just be like, it's how I was raised, in this really smug attitude. Meanwhile, again, I've seen people who are raised Catholic like me, or in, like, Christian households, or like very just strict religious environments, who grew up to be, like, the total opposites. Like, again, you do you, like, you can believe whatever you want, like, I don't care, but it's like, you don't need to shove it down our throats. Again, it's so weird, because atheists will complain about, like, Christians making generalizations about them for their views, but they go on and do it themselves. It's just the hypocrites. Just hypocrites everywhere. And frankly, just like how everyone's ignorant, like, we're all hypocrites. Like, everyone is a hypocrite about something. Like, some are definitely worse about it than others. But, like, yeah, I'm no exception. That fact. So, yeah, it's easy to point out the hypocrites and, like, and presidential candidates, but it's really important that we call out the hypocrites amongst ourselves too, because people are so quick to point out problems on the other side. Like, the left will always blame the right for XYZ, and the right will always blame the left for XYZ, but they don't blame themselves for their own problems too. Because, like I said, there's so much infighting in the different communities. Like, I have considered registering as a libertarian, like, in the past. But I'd just be like, nah, I'm good. I'm an independent with libertarian leanings. Like, all of my views kind of go under, like, the libertarian, centrist, moderate, like, undecided, I don't give a shit sphere. When I say I don't give a shit, I'm just like, I don't give a shit if the views that, like, I subscribe to make me sound like a liberal or sound like a conservative. I really don't. Like, I only care about subscribing to the views that I think make the most sense. And there's some subjects I'm, like, undecided on. It's not because I don't care that I'm not interested. It's like, hey, I can't take a side on that subject because it's not my fight. I feel like. So yeah, like, hey, liberals, like, or actually, let me start with this example first. Hey, conservatives. Just because I have my pronouns, my Instagram bio, just because I stand with Ukraine, just because I have, excuse me, I consider myself, like, you know, I on a basic level, a feminist and like I support the basic principles of movements like Black Lives Matter and I'm pro-choice, that doesn't make me a liberal or a leftist. And hey leftists, hey liberals, just because I'm pro Second Amendment and believe and I'm not for open borders and and support, like I said, I support gun rights and I'm pro freedom of speech and I'm like pro free market and like more economically, in favor of small government and low taxes. Like, and then watch a lot of YouTubers criticizing feminism and, criticizing SJWs. That doesn't make me a conservative. Like, I don't know. I don't care if the views if I'm like on the left or on the right, because I feel like it's just everyone's so split nowadays where it has to be one way or the other. Like, and I'm getting sick of it because I feel like American politics is like Newton's third law. For every action, there's like an equal but opposite reaction. Like, I'm cool. Like, for example, I don't have a problem with like, I've made really great friends with like non-binaries and like non-binary people and transgender people and people who go by like they them theirs pronouns or don't agree with the gender they were assigned with at birth. Like, most of those people I've met from those communities are cool as fuck. Like, they're not these crazy, like, neo-pronoun, like, kooks that you see on TikTok, those cringe compilations. And here's the thing. People, like, yes, people who freak out over being called sir or ma'am, like, yeah, they are not being, or people who just act like it's the end of the world for someone mistaking their pronouns, like, yes, people like that exist. But again, people who, like, I feel like for every one of those, like, types of crazies from those particular communities, there's also, like, an equally crazy equivalent on the right who's just like, oh, if you leave your pronouns in your Instagram bio, that says everything I need to know about you. Like, those kinds of conservatives who are just super uptight, like, ugh, he says his pronouns on his pin. It's like, oh, if you need to, like, specify your pronouns, like, oh, you're just, like, a cuck or whatever else. It's like, no, I'm not. Like, oh, that says everything I know about you. No, it doesn't. Bro, I just decided to put my he, him, his, my Instagram bio. Like, is that such a crime? Like, yeah, like, at work, we all have key cards to get in and out of the zoo, and it's like, sure, I'll put my he, him, his pronouns on my, on my gate tag. Like, I don't care. And again, like, just like how, we don't all think the same, like, that includes, like, it's not like people in the LGBTQ plus spectrum are not all a hive mind. Like, they don't all think the same. Most of them really don't. Because my friend Emerald in Colorado told me the wisest thing. Right before I graduated from CSU, like, another friend and I were hanging out with Emerald at their place. Like, you might recognize Emerald from my Jurassic World Dominion review and my review for the movie Men. And, like, a handful of other videos I made back in 2021, 2022, before I left for the zoo internships, like before I left Fort Collins. And they told me it's like being overly invested in a political ideology is just bad for you. I really feel like I am. If you're watching this video right now, I really hope you're well. I love you. I hope I hear from you soon. But they were just like, it's just bad for your mental health and will just negatively affect your relationships and like the way you see things in ways where it really doesn't have to. And just remember, if you ever are at an argument or a disagreement with someone, the moment you start screaming and cursing is the moment you'll lose. Like, at that point, all respect is gone out the door. I'm done listening to you. Like, you're crazy. Like, party's over. Goodbye. See you later. Good riddance. Like, it's so frustrating because it's like, you could still be like, excuse me, but two things can be right at once. Like, you can be like what's a good example that I'm thinking of? Like, you could be very pro-Israel, for example, or very pro-Palestine. Like, you could be like, just because you're pro-Palestine doesn't mean you're pro-Hamas, right? And just because you're pro-Israel doesn't mean you're pro-Netanyahu, their prime minister. Like, you could be like you could be like, hey, I stand with Israel or I stand with Palestine, and not one, like, innocent civilians in both countries being slaughtered in the streets. Like, that whole, like, I visited my friend Gotti in San Francisco this year, back in June, and he moved to Israel our summer going to 8th grade. Like, we were best friends in middle school, and he's finally moving back to America next year, and I finally got to fly out and see him when he and his dad were on vacation looking at apartments in California. Yeah, so I finally got to see him. He's been living in Jerusalem all his time, and oh boy, he had a lot to say about that whole part of the world, and he's a huge advocate for a two-state solution. And I've heard plenty of, like, young, like, Jewish friends, like, my age, and, like, you know, Israeli citizens, and Palestinians and Muslims, too, like, advocate for a two-state solution, because, I mean, again, I could be ignorant, I could be naive, it's, like that whole part of the world's that conflict's been going on for so long now. I would just really like to see it end. Just like Ukraine, it's like, I'm of Eastern European descent. Like, my grandparents came over to America, like my Macheta and Sanalis on my mom's side. My mom's first generation, so was my uncle. But they came over here after World War II with, like, nothing. Like, my homeland, Lithuania, was, like, torn to shreds by both Nazis and Soviets. The other Baltic states, too, like Latvia and Estonia. Eastern Europe was just a war zone for most of the 20th century. So when Lithuania was occupied by the USSR back in the 80s, my mom would tell me stories about, like, the local Ukrainians, like, in New York City, the immigrants and the Ukrainian Americans showing up to stand with Lithuania and the other Baltic countries. No one asked them to, but they showed up anyway to, like, stand up for us, you know, against the USSR. So all these years later in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it's like all the Baltic people were like, hey, we stand with Ukraine! Like, and I have a Ukraine, like, pin in my car. It's like, but at the same time, I can understand why a lot of my fellow Americans are upset with how much money we're sending them, while spending very little on our own relief for, like, Hurricane Irene or the fires in Maui. Like, I can get behind an America First attitude. Like, I do believe, like, in America first, that we should be taking care of, because I like to believe this is not, like, a horribly selfish thing to say, but it's like, we're not in any place to help other countries with their problems if we can't help ourselves, like, with our own first. Like, yeah, I'm not saying, obviously, like, I can't, like, this is one reason why I didn't vote for Trump, was because I didn't, like, he's buddies with Putin. And he's praised the guy before, and it's just like, how? Like, the guy, Putin wants to bring back the Soviet Union, and he, like, when they invaded Ukraine back in 2022, like, he said, like, oh, I'm gonna kill all the Nazism, like, the fascism in Ukraine. It's like, Zelensky, like, the Ukrainian president, my man is Jewish. He's a Ukrainian Jew. Idiots! See, like, you know, Green Day's like, don't want to be an American idiot. It's like, there's idiots all around the world. And it's crazy. And that's the other thing, like, with the political correctness, it's like, you know, I've been very vocal over the years, ever since high school. Like, I was not, like, I went kind of, like, when I started making YouTube videos, like, when I was, like, in high school making videos back then, I went through kind of a goody two-shoes phase where I would, like, you know, be that super, like, PC, like, hey, it's don't be racist, you know, don't be homophobic, like, don't be sexist, and, like, I would, like, correct my friends for making, like, offensive jokes over Xbox Live. Excuse me. But it's, like, I feel like I said, for every action there's an equal but opposite reaction. Like, there's just so many horrifically racist people on the right, for sure, but then again, it's like, the left really isn't making things much better anymore. Like, honestly, I can get behind the idea that the left nowadays is low-key more racist and more sexist and more obsessed with dividing everyone based on race and gender than conservatives. People on the right who are very, like, racist and very homophobic and very transphobic and very sexist. But again, like I said, the left isn't really making things much better either. Like, because on one hand, obviously sexism is a horrible thing, and women have fought so hard over the centuries to get equal rights to men. And again, I can totally get behind feminism in that regard. But where it loses me is, like, when the feminists, like, not all of them, obviously, but they start parading all this propaganda, like, all men are monsters, or that all men are, you know, rapists, or that men are pigs, or that, like, all these things, they say like they paint like they have this very black and white idea of like, hey, men are always the perpetrators, women are always the victims, like men get all the privileges and have everything, like men always have it better, women always have it worse, and it's like, oh, men are always the evil ones and women are always the good ones, unless that woman's a conservative. Here's the thing, again, most people my age, at least, the people on the left that I've met over the years, for the most part, are not religious, right? And they see people who they disagree with as, like, the enemy, or people who they perceive as, like, someone who's higher up on, like, the privilege scale. Like, I do believe that white privilege exists. Like, I'm a straight white man who grew up I grew up Catholic in an upper class neighborhood. Yeah, I have a lot of privileges that loads of other people in this country, like women and minorities, don't. But I just think it's been greatly exaggerated. And I think the biggest privilege of all is class privilege, and the left doesn't want to recognize that, in my opinion. Like, and this whole idea that, like, oh, that white people can't experience racism and that black and brown people can't be racist, I think is completely ridiculous. Like, they're just, like, they're changing the ways that words have been defined for, like, centuries just to fit their narratives. And again, it's like, you could be, like, if you're not a straight white Christian male who disagrees with them on anything, they see you as, like, free game, be called, like, all the nasty, like, you know, slurs in the book. Like, it's just wrong. And it's crazy because these people think that they're so high and mighty, they're so justified in what they're doing. When it's like, it's crazy because I've had, like, white liberals be all like, oh, if Vitas, you better keep your vote for third-party candidates to yourself. Like, I'm warning you, like, you're abusing your white straight male privilege by voting for third-party candidates. Guess what, viewers? Not one person of color I've ever met cares that I voted for Gary Johnson or Joe Jorgensen, like, back in 2016 or 2020. Like, the only people who've ever, like, been judgmental of me for that are, like, white liberals, which, honestly, in my opinion, are, like, the most racist people on the face of the planet. Or maybe not on the face of the entire planet, that's kind of an exaggeration. But you guys get what I'm saying. Like, you know, people have, like, savior complexes, and they, like, pose as your friend, and you don't know who to trust anymore. And it's like the misinformation, the algorithms on social medias and everything, it's like, it's almost designed to keep you hooked, so you keep consuming the same things over and over again. And it's like, you know, just like how super, like, hardcore, like, conservative Christians need to realize that, hey, the religious freedom is not synonymous with, like, Christian supremacy, right? You know, people, some, like, not all, obviously, some atheists and some, like, really hardcore, like, leftists and socialists who have very, like, you know, who are very pro-church-state separation, that doesn't mean it's synonymous with religious eradication either. Like, I've heard people advocate for just, like, the extermination of, like, religious freedom, and it's like, it's so crazy because the left keeps painting conservatives out to be these horrible, like, if you vote for, like, Trump, or if you're a conservative, like, oh, you're a horrible person and I hate you. It's like, it's crazy because they keep calling conservatives the racists and the hateful, intolerant xenophobes. But if I'm going to be honest, from my experience, it's actually been kind of the opposite. Like, again, my political awakening started at the end of high school, but it kind of flourished through my freshman and sophomore year at CSU when I was involved in the Libertarian Club at CSU my freshman year. Like, that club disbanded my sophomore year, so we kind of just, like, because economically, at least, Libertarians and Republicans see eye to eye for the most part. So we clumped ourselves with the Republican Club at CSU. And, let me just say that, like, they really taught me, like, the Republicans at CSU, they taught me that just because you label yourself a particular thing, like, with a particular party, doesn't mean you're everything that party stands for. Like, just because someone's a registered Republican doesn't mean they're just like everyone you see on Fox News. And just because someone is, like, a registered Democrat doesn't mean that they're, like, everyone you see on CNN. Like, did I meet some really, like, far right-wing conservative crackpots while I was at CSU? Absolutely. Like, I made most of my friends at CSU through, like, that through those like conservative political clubs, as well as like my church Outpost, the one I used to go to, where I met my former roommates, my ex-girlfriend, and like my best friends throughout CSU, basically. Like, and like I said, learn a lot from those you disagree with. Like, some of the friendliest people I've, like, realist, most like intellectually diverse people I've ever met are either conservatives or Christians. And it's like, I remember, like, I was definitely the more like liberal, like, you know, left-leaning quote-unquote person in the room whenever I would attend college Republican club meetings, but I was never like treated with any sort of like hostility or disrespect for like not voting for Trump or being pro-choice or like any of my more like not so conservative views. Like, I remember like sitting in, they were all like pitching ideas for like a pro-life tabling at the LSC Plaza, the Laurie Student Center Plaza, and their at the time president, which if she's watching this vote right now, I think she knows who she is. Like, I remember her saying, Vitas, I know you have like different opinions on that, so if you want to like sit this tabling out, like I totally understand. And if she's watching this right now, she's probably gonna like call me the like, Vitas, you were the king of tangents, like in the comments section, because she used to do that during our meetings as well. But yeah, like, I was like that. There were some really cool people, and I even met Peter Yu, who ran Republican for Congress back in 2018 a few times. And like, I just, again, you can learn from like, and it's funny because like my freshman year at CSU, like, there was SAWS, Students Against White Supremacy, that club that was like, again, being against white supremacy is fantastic on paper. That's completely not offensive to anyone as well, not a white supremacist, right? But those people were just like so radically like on the left that they just think that anyone who's even like slightly disagree with is just like, again, is a white supremacist automatically. I said automatically twice in the same sentence, my bad. But yeah, I remember them like just screaming at people on campus and being all like, and just calling like Turning Point USA like a hateful like white supremacist organization, when there were literally more like black students and like Latin American and Asian students going to Turning Point USA club meetings than the Students Against White Supremacy meetings. Like, it was hilarious. Like, I've met like, you know, conservatives of all stripes, like, you know, of all identities. Like, I've met black conservatives, Asian conservatives, like Latin American conservatives. I've met female conservatives, like gay conservatives, bisexual conservatives, transgender conservatives, Jewish conservatives. I've met Norse pagan conservatives. Like, yeah, there are conservatives like of all stripes, just like how there are feminists of all stripes. Like, again, I definitely, like I said, I can definitely get behind a textbook definition of feminism, and because I acknowledge that, you know, just like Christianity and Islam and, you know, any other, like, literally any religion or ideology that exists, like, there is no one-size-fits-all package that is feminism. It's more like there's different flavors of feminism in the feminist ice cream shop. Like, if you believe, like, yes, there is this basic, like, principle, like, little list of principles that they all agree with, but within that, like, basic, like, definition as to what their movement is, like, there are a lot of different, like, perspectives that you can take. So, like, and but here's the thing, there kind of lies my issue with both sides of that, like, coin, because on one hand, it's like, yeah, there are plenty of conservatives who, like I said, the vast majority of my friends, like at like the conservative that I met at the conservative clubs at CSU, were more like right-leaning centrists than anything else. They weren't like far right by any means. Like, you go into these far right-wing territories, and yeah, I have met some really like sketchy characters there, like, you know, people who are into this alt-right stuff, which thankfully the vast majority of like conservatives, like, yeah, I've met over the years, are not like that. Just like how with feminists, it's like, yeah, there's plenty of feminists who are like super cool people and who, again, who do generally care about men's issues, who do notice like, hey, men face issues just as much as women do in this country. Like, hey, there's the male loneliness epidemic, there's men committing suicide 4 times more likely than women, there's men are the vast majority of workplace fatalities, and like and are more likely victims of homicide. Like, men get incarcerated for the same crimes more often than women do, and like men are incarcerated for longer sentences than women. Like, there's people who think that, hey, it's okay for men to cry and show their emotions, and it's okay to be creative and enjoy the arts, and hey, it's cool to like dress however you want and like present yourself however you want, like live your life, do as you please. But at the same time, though, there are also some feminists who I think have like these like denominations within feminism in particular, I think have just gone too far to the left or too far to the right. Like, there's these crazy, like, people who call themselves feminists who just hate men and just, like, think that all men are pervs and all men are monsters and, like, oh, anything masculine is just evil. Which, here's the thing, I don't give a shit about, like, if I come off as, like, masculine or, like, feminine or whatever else. Like, I don't care if the way I dress or the way I talk or my opinions or the way I act and present myself. I don't care if, like, the art or entertainment that I consume on a regular basis, like the books or the movies or TV shows or video games or whatever else I watch or consume, or whatever I do for fun makes me look like a man or a boy or a girl or a woman or whatever else. I just want to be myself. And people, like, it hasn't happened to me, not in person at least, but people will look at my beard and think, I'm pretty sure someone's gonna think, oh, how dare he grow out a beard? That's toxic masculinity. It's like, no, it isn't. Like, yeah, there's just some feminists who get so entrenched in this, like, that sort of rabbit hole, they, like, become just as bad as, like, the conservatives think that all women belong in the kitchen or something. Meanwhile, on the other hand, like, feminists, like, some feminists have swung a little too far to the right, like the TERFs, for example, like J.K. Rowling, which... Oh man, I still love Harry Potter. Like, I do believe in separating the art from the artist, but like, geez, that's a TERF, that's a can of worms I really don't feel like talking about right now. Anyways, like, this whole subject, it's like, back to what I said about, like, my conservative friends at CSU, it's like, again, I have never, like, the vast majority of, like, conservatives I met at CSU, like, could not care less about your gender or your race or, like, where you're from or who you marry or what, or, like, your color or, like, what religion you practice. Like, they actually saw everyone as individuals. Like, it's very ignorant and naive to say things like, oh, race doesn't exist. I feel like, especially coming from a white person. Again, I acknowledge it to an extent, like, white privilege definitely exists. But, like, I think it's more, like, the way to end bigotry, in my mind, is not to stop seeing our difference of identities, like race or gender or whatever else, but to start seeing individuals. Let's look past the basic barriers of, like, things like, hey, not all white people think the same, not all black people think the same, not all Asian people think the same, not all Latin American people think the same, not all Native Americans think the same, not all biracial mixed people think the same, not all Pacific Islanders think the same, like, not all men think the same, not all women think the same, not all gay people think the same, not all straight people think the same, not all bisexuals think the same, not all transgenders, non-binaries think the same, like, not all Christians think the same, not all Jews think the same, not all Muslims think the same, not all atheists think the same, not all agnostics think the same, not all Hindus think the same, not all Muslims think the same, I said that already, not all Buddhists think the same, not all insert other religion or spirituality that exists here think the same. You get the idea. I just wish people understood that more, and thankfully, like, the majority of, again, not all conservatives are Christians, and not all Christians are conservatives. Most of my friends I met through that church and through those, like, that Republican club understood me, like, 100% on that. And again, like I said, the whole, like, I'm very pro-choice. Like, I'm pro-choice. Like, and I hung out with Republicans. It's like, I agree with them on enough of their policies to, like, stand with them on a lot of things. Like, I am pro-choice. Like, if we were to view, again, we need to stop, like, thinking in just these black and white, like, oh, you're either pro-choice or pro-life. That issue especially is, like, there's that whole, it truly is a gradient. Like, people need to stop seeing it like that. It's crazy. This is why I think Trump is, like, the thing that kind of puzzled me was, like, I remember him back in 2016. He was like, "Oh, I'm very staunchly pro-life," and all the pro-choicers being so sick about it. Then Roe v. Wade was overturned under the Biden administration, and then in debates this year, he's like, "Oh, I actually find abortion in the cases of, like, rape or incest or endangerment of a child." But I digress. Like, if let's just say that 0 is like super pro-life and anti-abortion, and like 100 is like super like pro-choice, pro-abortion, I'd say I'm like at the 70% mark, like 75 to 80% mark. I'm very pro-choice and very much for like the woman's right to choose with what happens to their bodies. Again, for the same reason why like I'm 80% pro-gun control and pro-Second Amendment, because I've talked about this before in previous Skizzo ramblings where outlawing guns doesn't stop gun violence, for the same reason why outlawing abortion won't stop abortions. All you're doing is just throwing both of those things into the hands of criminals and just making it worse. Like, again, prohibition didn't stop people from drinking in the 1920s, and raising the drinking age of 21 in this country hasn't stopped teenagers from getting alcohol, and the war on drugs never stopped anyone from smoking weed. And again, I don't know if it's going to be legalized in any more states this year, but like having it outlawed in half the country hasn't stopped people from smoking it illegally in other states. Nor has legalizing it, have stopped people in legal states from, buying it off dealers, which that money goes to cartels and stuff like that, which is crazy. But anyways, like, I just think that simply outlawing things won't stop people from doing it. And like, again, pro-lifers, they're kind of like vegans in the sense where it's like, I understand and respect where both those communities are coming from. The pro-lifers, I get it. They're not sexist and hate women or hate women's rights. They just think it's wrong to kill a fetus. Just like how a lot of vegans think that it's wrong to like kill cows and pigs and sheep and other farm animals. But where they lose me is when they start like just acting all condescending and militant and preachy. And again, those people, they tend to be massive hypocrites. But here's the thing. I tend to find other pro-choicers just as big of hypocrites as the pro-lifers. Because here's the thing. This is one of the points I'm getting at here. Like, I can count maybe on 2 hands the number of, like, right-wingers I've met who say things like, "Oh, I would never be friends with a Biden supporter or a Kamala supporter. I would never be friends with a liberal. I'd never be friends with a Democrat. I'd never be friends with a leftist. Like, oh, if you voted for Kamala, or if you are on the left, like, you're just a horrible person. I hate you." I've never met a conservative make just flat-out blanket statements like that about liberals. Like, not very, very frequently, at least. Not any times I can remember off the top of my head, at least. But I can think of so many instances of the reverse. Like, liberals and leftists and Democrats and pro-choicers and feminists saying, like, saying, like, "Oh, I hate all conservatives. I hate right-wingers. Like, I hate, like, if you vote for Trump, like, oh, you're a horrible person. I hate you." I have met so many people like that, I've lost count. Like, I've seen, like, liberals, like I said, I've seen feminists talk about men, and, like, social justice warriors and, like, Black Lives Matter activists, like, talk about white people, and, like, liberals and leftists talk about, like conservatives, or even, like, centrists or moderates or, like, apolitical people, or literally anyone who they disagree with. Like, I've seen I've seen these crazy, like, again, not all of them obviously, but I've seen certain, like, LGBTQ plus activists, like, talk about, like, straight people and even other members of the LGBT community. And I've seen it, because there's a lot of infighting there too, unfortunately. And I've seen atheists and non-religious people, like, talk about, like, Christians and religious communities. And I've seen vegans, like, talk about meat eaters, and, like, how Nazis talk about Jews. And it's kind of frightening. Like, they say stuff like, oh, that hate speech isn't free speech. And yet, I've heard more hate speech. I've heard more hateful things coming from those people saying hate speech isn't free speech than I've heard from people saying, like, no, hate speech is free speech. Because, I'm gonna set my drink again, hold up. Excuse me. Because I've heard more hateful things coming from those people over the years. This is like, I am a free speech absolutist. Like, I believe that all forms of speech, including hate speech, should be protected. Again, for the same reason why I'm pro-gun rights and I'm pro-choice. Because, again, like, if you're just outlawing people from saying things just because you find it offensive. Like, well, guess what? That's really not going to stop anyone from saying whatever offensive things they're going to say. Like, we've seen, like, all this censorship going on, like, in the Western world, like, in Western Europe especially. It's like, I've been to Germany, like, I've been to Frankfurt for vacation, like, back in 2019. And, like, their whole, like, you cannot, like, talk about, like, you know, the SS or any sort of, like, you know, that sort of dictatorship's regalia or any, like, you can't, like, do like a Heil in public or stuff like you for completely understandable reasons. They're very self-conscious of their history, and they've like censored anything to do with like that part of that part of their history. But here's the thing, that censorship has actually made the whole like white supremacist and white nationalist movements and the whole neo-Nazi movements in those countries more exciting to like young people, because it has like rebellious, edgy side to it. So I would hate to see the same thing happen in the United States, because there would be like a resurgence of more hate groups if we did that, if we denied their right to say whatever it is they have to say. Because again, like, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And it's crazy to think like people like, you know, the left is this whole like all this like white guilt narratives, which I think is really not healthy. Like I said, I do believe that white privilege exists, but I don't support using it as like a tool for shaming people. That's the other thing that gets under my skin about the left, is that I've heard people be like, oh, again, especially the leftists who like grew up religious but then became not religious and then joined the left later. It's like, oh, like I stopped feeling ashamed when I stopped being religious, because religion is all about shaming people. But the thing is, I've seen like liberals and vegans, for example, be way worse about shaming people and using fear-mongering and guilt-tripping and scare tactics than religious people I've met. Like, I'm dead serious. Because, again, they just want, like, I just don't think it's right to shame white people for, like, all the colonization throughout history. Like, I really... Because, here's the thing, not one white person alive today has owned a slave. Like, anyone who's legally owned a slave has been long dead. Like, I don't think, as white people, like, we shouldn't feel sorry or guilty for, like, the actions of the colonizers who colonized Africa and the Americas, for the same reason why, like, I don't think people of Japanese descent should apologize to, like, China, or, like, I don't think Japan should struggle with, like, World War II guilt for their actions towards China and Korea and the Philippines and other Asian and Pacific countries during World War II. Or I don't think people of Mongolian descent should feel sorry to, like, the Chinese or other, like, territories that the Mongols conquered during their reign. Like, I don't think people of, like, various Native American tribal descents should feel sorry to other Native Americans for their because there was a long history of, like, tribal conflicts between native tribes and the Americas long before Europe showed up this continent in the first place. And that same thing in Africa and Australia and Asia and, like, all around the world. Humans are just violent. Like, religion and race is irrelevant. Like, we're just gonna find reasons to kill each other. And we're still going to, like, again, look all around the world. And honestly, with this whole, like, divide between the left and right of this country, a civil war, I'm not holding my breath on it, but if that Alex Garland movie becomes a reality that came out this year, I wouldn't be too surprised. Like, sometime in the next not so distant future, just it's all madness. And again, like, I want to be the change that I want to see. Like, I don't give a shit if sorry, I got something stuck in my tongue. Yeah. I don't give a shit if about your, again, like, I don't care about your beliefs or your identities, like your race or your gender or your sexuality or, like, where you're from or your age or your abilities or those things. Like, I don't care about, like, your goals or your hobbies or your opinions or interests or your job or your education or your life choices. Like, I only care about how you let those things influence your actions, how you treat others. Like, that's the thing. And man, like I said, there's so much I could say about this subject. I just, at this point, I've become just so jaded to, like, everything. Like, I'm very I have faith in our country. I have faith in democracy. Like, I know we're technically, like, America is not like a democracy, quote unquote. It's like a constitutional republic. But I mean, I just feel like there's nothing we can't do as long as we set our minds to it. Like, you can be whoever you want to be, like, in this life. And I really want to see the world just be like a friendlier place. Because, like I said, I have met some horrifically racist people, like sexist people, homophobic people in my time. Like, I have met like fascists and like white supremacists. Again, when I say, like, I think that we should legalize all speech, like, we should protect all speech, like free speech, like, even including hate speech, that does not mean I want to be friends with bigots. Okay, let me just make that clear very, like, right now, right? But at the same time, it's like, part of me, like, there's that rage in me that just wants me to, like, punch someone like that in the face, but other part of me just wants to, like, give them a hug. Because, again, like, no one gets that way by accident. Like, I do believe that prejudice is taught, and I've talked about that in previous videos. Like, happy people don't feel the need to think that they're better than others because of belief or race or gender or sexuality or whatever else. Like, I don't, like, again, am I at, like, hey, I look at my life and it's like, hey, I've lived, if I die tomorrow, I can say I died living a great life. Like, I have so much to be thankful for. Like, it's been a long, lonely grind, just trying to make my way into this world, with going throughout high school and college and graduation and, all these internships and, having this job that I have now and all these other jobs I've taken over the years. And yeah, I'm still getting there. I'm still, like, searching for, like, the next, like, big thing. But I'm enjoying the ride along the way. So it's like, hey, I don't need to be mean to you. I don't need to insult you. I don't need to yell at you or make fun of you. And, like, I don't need to subscribe to hateful ideologies, whether they're on the left or on the right or anywhere else. And it's like, truly thinking for yourself is taking the initiative to familiarize yourself with as many different, like, interpretations as, like, and as many different, like, viewpoints and perspectives and communities as possible, whether that leads you, and then you pick the one that you think makes most sense, whether it leads you to the left, the right, or wherever else. And yeah, like, again, I could go on about this subject all night, but it's getting kind of late, and I got some editing to do, so this is going to be the last point I want to make. Back to what I said earlier, I think Americans treat politics like how lions and hyenas and other African carnivores treat gazelle. Right? But here's the thing. because you guys know this about me by now, like, I've interned at zoos. Like, I've spent, like, at the Utica Zoo last summer, like, when I was interning in upstate New York, before I came back to New Jersey and before I got hired here in Ohio. I spent a lot of time at the hyena and lion exhibits at that zoo, right? And hyenas and lions in the wild, like, in Africa, are sworn enemies. Like, a lion can easily kill a hyena from one swipe from its paw, like, to the hyena's head. They're 5 times the hyena's size. And lions steal food from hyenas way more than the reverse. But at the same time, hyenas are a lot faster. They're better at hunting than lions. They're better at, like, taking down their prey, like, statistically speaking. And they have a bite force of 1,000 pounds per square inch, which means they can straight up eat bones, like, on carcasses. And they are extremely smart. Like, big cats are smart cookies too, don't get me wrong. But hyenas are known to solve puzzles better than chimps. Right? So they have this intense rivalry over, like prey and territory. And you guys have seen The Lion King, that movie, like, demonized hyenas and, like, painted lions out to be these noble saints, right? But the truth is, I can't help but see the two species like yin and yang in a weird sense, where it's like one is just not complete without the other. Like, there is a piece of one species within the other, especially when you take into consideration that hyenas are actually more related to cats, like lions, than they are to, like, dogs and bears. That's one thing. They're both native to the same habitats. They both hunt the same, like, they both eat the same, like, diet. They're both carnivores. They both have, like, matriarchal social structures. Like, yeah, any, like, lion expert will tell you it's the lion queen, not the king. Like, girls, like, the lionesses, both lionesses and female hyenas will stick together with their sisters their whole life. While male lions and male hyenas will leave their respective pride or clan they grow up in and join a new one. And like they both they both travel in packs. They both are very like vocal compared to other members of their family, and they're both in the top two biggest members of their families. Like lions are the second biggest cats, while other tigers, while spotted hyenas in particular are the largest of the hyena species. And spotted hyenas will make whooping calls, just like how lions make their roars that can be heard from miles away. They're both very adaptable. They're both surprisingly good swimmers. Like, there's a whole population of lions in the Okavango Delta that swims after buffalo that goes wading in those waters, and, like, hyenas will dive the bottoms of ponds to eat hippo carcasses. They both have extinct relatives that could be found on multiple continents. Like, there used to be, like, cave hyenas in, like, Europe and in Asia as well as Africa. And lions could be found on, like, every continent except Australia and Antarctica back in their day. But yeah, and most of all, both species are integral to the circle of life. Because lions, without predators like lions and cheetahs and wild dogs and like crocodiles, the savannas in Africa the herbivore populations would spiral like way too out of control. And without hyenas and other like scavengers like vultures and jackals, the savannas would be filled with dead, rotting, disease-spreading carcasses, right? So with all that being said, if hyenas and lions can be sworn enemies in the wild, but still have like that many similarities, I do believe the left and the right can coexist in America. Because really, there's so much more that unites us than there is that divides us when we put aside politics, and when we put aside like the things that are angering us on Fox News and CNN, these bullshit news outlets. That like we can just sit down, like have a beer or have a cup of tea or like, you know, get a bite to eat and just like talk about life. Like we can like look at this, like I'm using Minecraft gameplay in this right now, this video I've been filming. And again, like last night I talked about Ninja Turtles, and there's a reason why I didn't mention politics at all in that video. It's because I wanted to do something just completely silly, like me, like, yelling at a toy beaver while watching Ninja Turtles. Because both conservatives and liberals have kids who grew up loving Ninja Turtles, as well as dinosaurs and animals, and have, like, goals and ambitions, and want to go for the same things in life, and have relationships. And it's like, again, I just feel like there's way bigger enemies that we have than each other. Like, I do believe that, like, the censorship and the misinformation and the bigotry and the extremism and the echo chambers and the two-party system are, like, the worst enemies, people on both sides in this country and like, you know, it's just, and, like, the world in general. Sorry if you guys hear that. Than, like, the left and the right or anywhere else ever will be to each other. Just like how in Africa, like, lions and like, humans are the worst enemy. Like, you know, the poaching and the habitat loss. That's the worst enemy to both species, and lions and hyenas and other African animals ever will be to each other. Man, so yeah, even if Kamala won the election, I still would have made this video. Again, I was braced for disappointment either way. But, like, I still really want to make this video and get it all off my chest. And yeah, anyways, I got some editing to do. And if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I thank you for spending your time with me. You totally did not have to do that. But thank you. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe if you guys haven't already. And please stay beastly.